me your learnings, takeaways so far.
Oh, too much. You don't have enough time.
We have an hour 44 minutes.
CPR.
So now,
We're on track or off track? We're on track.
We have to start from the beginning with initial impressions and move from there and not be afraid to have the conversation.
Start from the beginning. Don't be afraid to have the hard conversations. Crucial, critical conversations.
That's right.
Yeah, got to have those.
And have Kate who can come to my cases.
when it just comes to raw number,
Uh-huh.
we're very stable.
Mm.
If you just look at a demographic number, I mean, rock solid. We have not changed, because I do pay attention to those numbers you asked about. We have not changed hardly at all, but that's the problem. We have not changed at all.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten about it. She reminded me. She goes, "Well, think of the argument you had last summer. We had 145 years. Wanted to have a big picnic, a big nice celebration, etc. I couldn't put a poster up because, you know, heaven forbid we have people come and just eat free food. Swear to God that conversation happened.
Yeah.
So we're so stable, but yet we have so far to go.
Yeah. 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 How about the rest of you? Kind of what is your takeaway at this point?
Forgotten you.
Or wonderings, maybe, even.
I think we all have a lot to do.
We have a lot of a lot of ministry to do.
A lot of ministry
We
to
got
do,
a
a
lot
lot
of
of questions to ask and ponder and
Yeah.
think.
But we have a roadmap. This is good.
We have a roadmap. We have questions, but we have a roadmap of what those questions should be. Okay?
I have a question.
Okay.
Is it possible to take a mission that's been happening maybe for a long time and make it more missional, or is it better to give up on it and start with some?
The answer is it depends. Okay? So one of the things that I like to do. Thanks for coming back, JR.
Try not to spill the coffee.
So can we pretend this is green beans just for the moment? Okay? Most of the time, we're going to do a food drive, right? We're all about food drives. United Methodist does food more than anything else, right? And so, again, I'm telling a story about my church, but when we do food drives, it was either quantity or even pounds, right? It was either the number or pounds. And we even got so far as the children, in the middle of worship, we would talk about this great thing that we're doing, and the children would get the cereal boxes and toilet paper and all of that and walk it down the aisle and do what? Put it on the altar. Put it in the chancel area. Why? So we could all see it. We could see the harvest. We could see what we were doing, and we could all pat ourselves on the back over it. Right? And then after worship, what happens?
You have a hard time finding somebody to get rid of it.
Well, that's true. Did you even hear it say, get rid of it?
But that's a fact.
Right. Okay? But some faithful soul packs it up and puts it in the back of their van or their truck or their car or whatever, right? And what do? They drive it to the food bank.
And drop it off.
Okay? And drop it off. And then what?
Nobody has
That's the end of it.
And then
That's the end.
And then you collect more.
Oh, and then we collect more.
I was going to say, for us, they actually serve at the food bank then.
Okay? So, did a great deed, right? Good deed. Nobody's going to debate that. Okay? But what kind of business are we in? Relationship. Where's the relationship in that? Okay? Now, don't go away saying, I told you not to do that. That is not what I'm saying. We can do some of that, but that's usually all we do. We don't do the relational piece. So if we were to change that, we'd say, is there an opportunity to build relationships with the folks that are actually receiving the food? Right? So instead of my can of green beans being trudged down the aisle, put on the altar, and driven across town, and somebody's going to have green beans next week because of that, amen. But do they know why? Do they know why? For all they knew, Uncle Sam put those green beans on the shelf for them.
In some cases they do.
In some cases they do, right? We're doing it out of the goodness of our heart, and we've been taught to do that as good Christians, right? But there's more. There's more. So what if this can of green beans, we have the opportunity to serve, or to at least have a relationship? So that if Tanya is the one that needs the green beans, that I would then come to Tanya and say, Tanya, you know, I have been so abundantly blessed. And I was able to throw an extra can of green beans in my shopping cart this week. And I am just so eternally grateful for that. And because of that, I wanted to share with you.
Thanks, my 5 kids won't go hungry.
My 5 kids won't go hungry. Tell me their names. We'll start a conversation. Okay? And say, I'll see you back next week, right? And you're going to tell me about that kid's birthday, right? And we begin a relationship. And then at some point, she's going to go, why do you do this? And then I can talk about why God, why a church, and then why my church. I don't talk to Tanya and say, you need to come to church with me. I've got to build a relationship first. But I can't build a relationship, thank you. I can't build a relationship if I'm sending my green beans across town.
No, because
Right?
those are the people who are building the relationship.
Correct. And so you say, well, we can't. And I said, then why are we doing it? Shouldn't we be doing something where we can be in relationship? Okay? Or it's the warm blanket, or it's the coat, or it's the mittens, or it's the school supplies, or it's the shoes. I mean, all of those things, they're great things. But friends, it's only half the equation. So the question is, how many of those things are we willing to turn into relational? And if we turn them into relational, we may have to give up some other ministries or some other missions in order to have the resources to do it and to do it well and to do it deep and relationally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay.
Make people just,
Hard decisions.
Yeah. Well, we have a community meal once a month, free. Thankfully, it's free. And we even, for the last 2 years, have been offering a worship service prior to it. And, you know, it's not a requirement, of course, but so we are, you know, there's at least that connection.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I just cannot get people on board with, even though I've talked about it a million times, is when we're done serving the meal, the people who helped will eat. And do you think that I can get them to mingle with the people who are at the meal? They sit by themselves.
So here's the critical conversation. What's the purpose of the community meal? If it's to build relationships, then who are the people that it's their job, they take responsibility for being at the tables and having conversation. And friends, if that's our purpose, and we don't have people willing to do that, then why are we doing it? We're being the church that serves a great meal, but they don't pay any attention to us. Some of the things we do are actually detrimental because of the way that we do them. Make sense? Okay? Yeah.
This means a lot to me because I just thought of it. I've brought this up. May not mean a lot to other people, but I know so often we hear the term, we're being the hands and feet of Jesus. And you know, it came to my thought, that's not enough. Because so many people say, oh yeah, I'm the hands of Jesus and the feet, I'm doing good. But I think we have to be the hands and feet of Jesus with the mind and heart of Christ.
That's right.
And that mind and heart of Christ gets into the relational part of it.
That's right.
Yes.
You know.
Amen.
Well said.
Yes.
Yeah.
You said it's a Martha Mary thing.
Yep.
Okay, we need Martha's in the kitchen and Mary's in the hall. It's almost two different crews.
Yep. Yep. And if we don't have both, then we ask, if that's the purpose of the event, then why are we having the event? See, we work ourselves so hard trying to do church, and we're doing things and we're not seeing fruit, and then therefore people get upset, or we're working and nothing's happening. Oh, we've tried that and it won't work. Well, it's because we weren't doing it relevantly, contextually, relationally, right? Do fewer things, do it well, do it relationally, and you're going to have a lot more return on your investment. And your biggest resource, your most valuable resource, are people's time. Right? So if they're putting their time in and nothing's happening as a result of their time, they're going to get frustrated. So what's the fruitfulness that's a return of what the ministry is about? You had something?
Yeah, we recently, our two churches got together and served at the Salvation Army, a lunch, and the same thing happened. All the older people clustered together, and my younger people, my youth group, went out and talked to people because they're less inhibited, you know. So they went out and talked to people, and one of my youth group, but we all got together in the back room and we were talking about it, and one of my youth group kids said, I learned a lot today. She said, I learned that that guy with the dirty fingernails, his fingernails are dirty because he works the earth. She said, I wouldn't have sat next to him at McDonald's before I knew anything about him, but I think I would now. But being able to get our kids to shine like that is really important too, because oftentimes they're the ones that lead adults into places that they don't necessarily feel comfortable going.
Yep. And so the next time, have the youth grab one of the adults
And take them.
and take them. Right? So many times we want our youth group to do things that we're not willing to do. Oh, we want to give them the opportunity.
Right.
But we want to give them the opportunity because we don't want to do it ourselves. Right? Okay. All right. So here's another recap of thinking about the three types of small churches. Smaller, stable small, and not yet big. Okay? Here's kind of a recap, a different way of looking at it. Is if you're a smaller church, you're talking more about what was, you're remembering when, what we used to do, what God called, called, past tense, us to do. We talk about the past, we always are looking back, and we plan by calendaring, okay? And by calendaring, we say, well, here's our 2017 calendar, and so we just copy it over to our 2018, because we've always done it, right? There's no intentionality around what gets copied over. So, a stable small church, the conversations are about present. What is working? What are we doing? What has God called us to do? What God calls us to do? We're talking about the present, and we're looking at today, and we actually do some ministry planning, okay? Intentionally around being missional and making disciples. But a not yet big church, their conversation is, what's yet to come? What are we dreaming about? What's God calling us to be? What we might do. What God is calling us to do. We're very future and forward thinking, and it's about strategic planning. Not just planning, but strategic planning. Right? So you can even look at this and say, what kind of conversations, what kind of language is used in our church? And this gives you an indication of what type of church you are at this point. Okay? Now, how many of you have determined what kind of small church you are? Feel like you're already there? Okay. How many not yet big churches do we have? Okay. How many small, stable community churches? Okay. And how many smaller? Okay. How confident do you feel with your determination?
30%. Right on.
How many of you are very confident? Okay? Well, you raised your hand and still said, oh, pretty confident. What would change your mind? What would change your mind in your determination?
In mine, I see movement between some and the other. Between the stable one and the one growing bigger. Mm-hmm. In other words, some are, there's dips where we're moving that way.
Okay. Okay.
That was my...
Okay. And most of you are here alone, right? Most of you are here alone. So it's your own personal assessment, right? And so when you have a group of people who have different perceptions, that may or may not change, right? Looking at more vital signs, looking at statistics over a 10-year period, and looking at it more comprehensively may or may not change your mind. So this is why it's important to get a team together to give you a more comprehensive look. And I asked you just as a gut reaction kind of where you're at. And that's important because it's going to kind of form where you're headed from here. Now, do you see the very first thing I have up here? Please resist home remedies. Okay? What does a home remedy look like in the church world?
Same old, same old.
Same old, same old.
We're always doing that way, won't you? We change
We always did it that way.
Well, let's do what we did in the past. We'll have a rally day. We'll do,
Okay.
yeah.
Surely if we do what we used to do again, we're going to get a different, it'll work, right? Or how about X church down the street does this, so if we do it, we'll get the kind of return that they will, right?
I just read a book.
That's what I was going
Is
to say.
that what you're going to say? Yeah. What were you going to say?
I just read a book, so let's try this.
Yep. Where there is no contextualization done.
The other thing we were
Right.
talking about on break is it seems like the smaller churches, at least the ones we're familiar with, they keep wanting to go after those people who left rather
Yep.
than reach out to the people
Yep.
who are not there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
the ones who left will come back.
Yep.
Yeah, that's their focus.
Right.
Or they won't, and that's okay.
Yep.
Yeah, you can't worry about the ones who aren't coming.
Well, if they have been gone more than 6 months, you're not going to get them back, more than likely. Okay? And if you're the pastor who's the incoming pastor and all they say is, Pastor, so glad you're here, because now that you're here, you can go and get all those people back that the previous pastor ran off. Okay? And that's their idea of evangelism, is going back. Right? That is not evangelism. Okay? If we were truly being the church, we would have, as other people in the congregation, have gone to them and say, you are so missed. We are the church. The pastor is not the church.
Amen.
So, can we move on? Relationally, but they wait for the pastor to do it, the next new pastor, as opposed to the congregation take care of congregational care. They leave it all to pastoral care. There's a difference. Pastoral care and congregational care. We use those terms interchangeably, do we not? But they're different. Right? And if we do congregational care, that won't be as big a deal. Yeah.
I just wanted to comment on the last slide when it was talking about the types of churches. When you're dealing with a smaller church, or at least my experience has been mostly older people, there aren't children, whatever. It's so hard to teach older people to dream again, to realize that even though they're at that end of their age spectrum, they've forgotten how to dream. They've forgotten how to believe, and so it's almost like you've got to work them out of that because they're hard and they're fast and,
And that's why the field trips are helpful too, because if they've been going to the same church for 50 years, they can't see anything else than what it's been or what it is.
Well, I actually had a parishioner say, why are these churches growing? And I said, well, I don't know. And she's like, well, why don't you know? And I said, because I'm not there. I'm here on Sunday mornings. You go and find out why they're growing and why we're not, And she said, so I can skip church? And I said, no, I didn't say you could skip church. You could go to church there. Skip our church, if you want to put it that way. But, find out.
But most of the time when we're trying things out of desperation, not as a strategic plan. Okay? Or mimicking someone else who has a different context. Or going back to do something that once worked in 1974 and thinking it's going to work again in 2018 without changing anything. Right? So resist home remedies. Most of the time you end up at the doctor anyway, right? And especially in church work, when you're using only the people in the room that got you to the place you are without some outside help and influence, it's going to be hard to move beyond where you're at. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So outside help is really important. All right. Now, I want to first talk about treatment plans for not yet big and stable churches. Okay? The not yet big. Okay? If you are a not yet big church, vision and planning are some of the most important things you need to do. Okay? What are you visioning towards? The unique way that you make disciples in your mission field. If every church has the same mission of making disciples, why doesn't every church look the same? It's because your vision is unique. The way you make disciples is unique. Okay? Vision comes from the intersection of the needs of your community, the passions of your leaders, and the gifts of your congregation. Okay? Anytime any of those three things change, your vision needs to change. And most of the time, if we have a vision, we're running on a vision that's 5 or 10 years old. Or longer.
I think that deserves repeating.
Yeah, yeah, I'm gonna ask you to do that too, thanks.
The needs of the community.
Passions of the leaders, and gifts of the congregation. Or a t-shirt, right? That's right. That's right. Yeah. Needs of the community, passions of your leaders, gifts of your congregation. We used to vision for 5 years, 10 years, and then it got 3 to 5. And friends, we have to change our vision every 18 months to 2 years at most. Why? Because anytime any one of those things changes, you have to have a new vision. Because it's no longer contextually relevant. If the needs of your community change drastically, your ministry needs to change. We have too many drive-in churches. Now, I'm not talking about movies, right? We used to live close to church, and we move further from church, but we still come back to church. We drive into church. And so we're looking at church through the reflection of the community it used to be when you lived close. It's no longer that community, but we act like it is. And therefore, we're not contextually relevant anymore. Right? So that's why it's important to run your mission insights and have your community conversations with people outside the church so that you know your community. Okay? And then we need to make sure that we have a vision that's God's preferred future of the unique way that you make disciples. And then everything you do should help you live into that vision. Period. Everything else should fall away. Sounds easy for me to have said it. I know it's difficult. But friends, because we haven't done it that way, we're in the shape we're in. Because we keep doing things because we've always done them, we're not doing them because they have intentionality, they have purpose, they have a missional focus. Okay? So, vision and planning towards that vision. Okay? Imagine starting your calendar blank. Things that only go on the calendar are those that help us live in to our vision.
While we're doing funerals,
Yeah.
Okay? Or we adapt those things that must go on the calendar to help us live into our vision. Right? All right, multiplication. What that means is that we have a spirit of multiplication. We have a DNA of multiplication. How are we, everything that we're doing, talking about reaching new people? If we're not talking about reaching people all the time, it is not just because we're going to forget about the people that are already here, okay? But it's kind of like if we go back to McDonald's, okay, what's the purpose of McDonald's? What do the shareholders think the purpose of McDonald's is? Okay, profit. Okay? Now, they make profit in unique ways. Their non-negotiables are the French fries, right? And being fast. Right? And no matter where you go across the world, the McDonald's French fry is the McDonald's French fry. Consistency. Quality. Right?
Right.
By gosh, you know you can go to a McDonald's bathroom because you know those are safe bathrooms to go in. They're pretty clean, right? They have that kind of culture and consistency, right? Now, if there is a McDonald's store that is not following one of those values of cleanliness, or, well, you're going to save some money, so you're going to order the off-brand French fries instead of the McDonald's French fries, do you think they'd still be in business? If they weren't making a profit for their shareholders, do you think they'd still be in business?
No.
But friends, we think church is different. And if we are not having kingdom fruit, but we can still be the church, how? How are we the church if we are not living on mission and sharing Jesus with other people? How is that being the church? I have people come to me and say, well, how can we do simplified structure? We don't have enough people. Well, if you don't have enough people for simplified structure, you certainly don't have people for traditional structure. And if you don't have enough people to even make decisions, how are you the church? But by gosh, we're not going to have a vital merger, or by gosh, we're not going to talk about doing something missional to reach new people. How are we the church? Critical conversations.
Well, I've been reaching out to it's an apartment building for people with disabilities and the aged, okay? And I've been doing a Bible study there. And we're trying to get I'm trying to get these people involved, building relationships with them. And you know what my people said?
Why are you spending time with them?
Well, we don't want them here because they're not going to give.
Yeah.
And I just look at them going, are you kidding me? They have 3 members that live there. I'm reaching out to the rest of those 3 members, but they're not good. They don't want to bring them in because they're not givers.
How do they know that?
Because they're on fixed income.
No.
So that's exactly right. That's what I said. I'm on a fixed income if you want to be technical about it. You know, you set my salary. I'm on a fixed income.
How's that the reflection of Jesus?
Yeah, exactly.
Are you willing to have that conversation?
Oh yeah, I did.
Okay.
I did with them. And I can't get them to change their minds.
Yeah.
You know, I want to offer rides for these people because they don't have transportation in church. So the only church they're getting is when I go and teach a Bible study to them. And so I said, you know, we could do great things with these folks if we could get a carpool going, or people would be willing to go in and pick them up and bring them to church. Can't get anybody to do
There was
it.
a pastor friend of mine on Mondays does a Bible study in a prison. And it's probably as joyful for him as it is, or even more.
Sure.
But anyway, one of the chair people at the church asked him if that's what they were paying him for. He said yes.
There you go. There you go. There you go. Okay, and the third factor for not yet big is people. Okay, and by the people factor, I'm talking about who are we paying attention to? Are we paying attention more to the insiders or the outsiders? Now, please hear that I'm not saying we ignore the people that are already there to reach new people, but we have to have a higher value on those who don't yet know Jesus than those of us who already do. And when we get that in order, things move much more smoothly. Okay? And so friends, as pastors, you may have to spend some time doing some discipling to get to that point with your people. Okay? Because if we're in a church that hasn't had a profession of faith in a decade, that tells you something. And that nobody's saying, why? Or our hearts are breaking because more people don't know Christ because this church exists, then we got to start there. If our hearts are not breaking for not reaching, we got to start there. Right? If we don't know, the people in the pews don't know that that's our purpose, we got to start there. And I think we've assumed that people know that. But friends, remember, we haven't had an intentional faith development process to get people to know that. And so we assume. What we've taught them is to be good members, write checks, and do good deeds for people. They're doing it. They're doing what we've taught them.
Absolutely.
We have to retool. We've got to retool. We've got to bring the bigger message. I think we've had a very narrow message, or a very narrow understanding of what a disciple meant. Because we lived through the 60s and the 70s when the church drew people. And we still act like our culture is that way, when it is not. Okay? All right, now let's move to the stable small church. Okay? A stable small church has a signature ministry. Okay? They do one thing and they do it really, really well. Okay? What is that signature ministry? Okay? And how is it impacting the community? And how is it relating to people getting to know Christ? Okay? Remember, go deep, don't go wide. And if we don't have one of those, develop one. And if we have it, shore it up so it's even stronger.
The church that I'm serving does a Christmas dinner mission project on the 24th, and has expanded to the point of getting other people involved to help us. And it's my people, after helping with that, say, you know, I talked to this lady and we talked about Jesus. And I just kind of celebrate.
Absolutely. So the question is, if we do that, are we to the point where we're getting names, we're developing relationships, we have side door or handoff opportunities. See, we work it deep, right? As opposed to, how can we expand on our signature ministry and develop even relationships with more intentionality? Okay, so trunk or treat is a great example. When you talk about, you know, one of your biggest outreach events, my stomach just turned when I said it, right? Trunk or treat. Okay, why trunk or treat? Oh, we have hundreds of people that come through. Okay, how many people knew Jesus because of it? Well, that's not our intention. Well, if it's outreach, it's your intention. But it's not intentional. So if it's our purpose to reach people, how are we doing that with intentionality? Because literally, trunk or treat is, you come up and you go, trick or treat, you get something, and you move on. And you move on. So how do you build a relationship when it's a 2-second interaction? But that was our intention, right? So if that's our intention, how do we build things into it that tend to build relationships, right? So in other words, how do we have things that are activities where there's interaction? Okay? Think about it with intentionality, with strategy. So if we're going to do trunk or treat, why do we do face painting? Because then a child is sitting there and their parent is standing beside them, and the host, whose job is to build relationships, hospitality, is having a conversation and getting to know that person. Or the bouncy house, you have 3 people standing outside the bouncy house who are hospitality talking to all the parents as their kids are in the bouncy house. Do you see what I'm talking about? Is if that's what we're doing, then build intentionality to make sure that you're actually getting that outcome. And then what? We get their names. We have a way to collect names. And then we have an intentional process for following up. And a form letter from your pastor is not follow-up. That is not a relationship. Okay? If you don't have a team of people who are willing to write handwritten notes and make phone calls to these folks, don't have the event. You're not ready. We pray the space in. We have a great event with radical hospitality and connectional opportunities, and then we have a follow-up team, and then we have a handoff event. What's next that these children are going to go to? And please don't say it's another event inside your church that you want them to come and do something. How are you going to them? You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. This is where we have to be strategic and intentional with what we're trying to do. And you do that with signature ministries. Because see, if you're doing that kind of follow-up, you're doing that comprehensive of a process, you're not going to be able to do very many of those. As a small church, if you do one of those and do it well a year, that's great. Large churches can only usually do 2 or 3 of those because of the ramp-up process and the follow-up process. Y'all with me? Okay. All right. beyond the family system. Okay? You know, we act like we're a family as opposed to an organization that's being sent out to do a mission. Okay? And so we cannot work in family systems and think that we're going to break out of a small church or even a growing church. Okay? And then how do we remain stable and share our story? Okay? If we're not careful, we get to the point of our life cycle and just small stable church can also go into decline. And they are probably very vulnerable for that. Because if those needs, passions, and gifts change and we don't adapt as the church, then we're going to go in decline and we're going to be a smaller church before we know it. Okay? So it's great, but we just have to make sure that we're continuously shoring ourselves up and adapting. We have to be a chameleon. We've got to adapt, adapt, adapt. Because that signature ministry could turn into a liability before you know it. If the needs of your community change and you don't change that signature ministry, you could be putting all of your energy over here that is no longer needed in your community when your community needs this, but you're so busy doing this that you didn't even notice that there's this change over here. Okay? But you have to continuously know your community and don't think, well, I know them because I asked those questions a year ago. You have to continuously ask those questions. Okay? Questions about this? Are you on overload, or are you on mid-afternoon slump, or you're processing? We should have had more sugar at break, or caffeine, maybe. All right. Now, when we're thinking about a smaller church, okay, we're getting smaller every day. We used to say, well, you know, there's only one option. Okay? I think there's lots of options for a smaller church. First of all, if you're a smaller church and you name that smaller church, you may choose no treatment. Sometimes you go to the doctor and the doctor tells you something and you go, yeah, whatever, and you don't change a thing, right? But you know, it's been named, you know, but you chose no treatment. That's fine. But at least you're going to go into your future knowing. Okay?
Won't that be in denial?
Not if you know and you're consciously choosing no treatment. Okay? Now, denial is you don't go through the process and know it and name it. Okay? That's like, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. We can pay the bills. We'll be fine. Right? But we used to worship 120 and we're down to 15. We'll be fine because we can still pay the bills.
Okay. Yeah, that balance is my question. Okay. Is it denial, or is it like they know what's going on but they don't want to treat you?
That's right. They choose.
So it could be both things.
Could be.
Okay.
But there are some people that they're diagnosed with cancer. They've gone through 2 or 3 treatments, and they choose the quality of life that they have versus a treatment that they think takes away their quality of life. Okay? Or, I've been through it, I'm ready to meet Jesus, and so bring it on. But they're choosing that intentionally. They're not saying, nothing's wrong, nothing's wrong.
So they'd rather be comfortable than actually going through the trouble of getting better.
Yep, that's their choice. But they're naming their future.
Okay.
They're living into their future knowing that that's what it is. Yep. Okay? So the second one is, you know what? We're going to name it. We're going to set a date, and we're going to call our funeral. We're going to call it. We're going to celebrate our ministry. We're going to celebrate everything that has happened here. Amen. Glory be. But you know what? Everything has a life cycle, and this one has come to an end. And so we're going to die with dignity. And while we still can, we're going to close the doors and celebrate. Okay? The third is to become a missional church. Okay? Now, in concept, friends, this sounds really, really cool. To make this happen is really, really difficult because it takes cooperation with a lot of churches. Need I say more? Okay? what I mean by a missional church is, let's say there are 6 churches, okay? And we come together and say, this one church right here just cannot keep its doors open. But it's this kind of hub in the community, and it's doing some great stuff. So the other 5 churches are going to take responsibility for that mission field, and it's going to be a mission outpost church. So we're going to go there to serve the people of that community. Okay? Did you hear cooperation is needed? Okay, that's why it's hard. Is we have trouble getting churches to cooperate together, right? Some of you are multi-point charges, you understand that, right? Okay? Or we decide to be experimental. Try some new stuff. Do some crazy things. And we're not going to just sit and do nothing, but we're going to try some things. We're going to go out with glory. It may or may not work, but we're going to try and do some cool new things. Okay? It may cost us our last $10,000 to try this, but you know what? We want to go out fighting as opposed to just sit here and pay the light bill. Okay? Be experimental. Right? Another one could be, we're going to close and restart. Okay? That means you close. It has to go dark. Okay? Because you cannot think that the church is going to close one Sunday and open up with a different culture and DNA the next Sunday. Okay? So it closes, it goes dark, and a new pastor is sent in to build up a whole new community, congregation, to come in and restart the church with a whole new DNA. Okay? That's a restart. The going dark part is usually the hard part for people. Okay? If it was going to grow under the current people, it was already going to grow, and it didn't. So typically, you need a different DNA to start a new church. Okay? Now, you've got to make sure that everything is right in the mission field. Is it a growing area? Is it not overpopulated with churches? I mean, you got to do your due diligence to make sure it's a place to do a restart. But restarts can be done. But friends, the other piece, if we're going to do a restart, is you've got to think about the resources. So if you're a church that has had delayed maintenance, and you want to have somebody else come in, and it's going to take $100,000 to get the building up to code, that's probably not a really good restart. Unless you have a $100,000 endowment that's going to take care of it. I don't know about you, but my office doesn't have that kind of money. Right? But we've had too many churches that have lived off their endowments to pay their pastors and pay their light bills and have done nothing. Right? And so we spend every last dollar, and then when the money's over, that's when we close. As opposed to, had they had a missional mindset a decade ago, we could have maybe had a new congregation in there that is vital and growing. Okay?
Question.
Yeah.
Close and restart, what's the time frame? It depends.
The closing piece, you've got to give people time to grieve. You've got to give people time, a celebration, like a homecoming celebration. And then that piece is over. And then normally you have to go dark for about a year, at least 6 months, but more likely a year. Because that allows the current people to find a new place. It allows a new pastor to come in and build up a new congregation before they actually launch worship. So that could be a year to 2 years, depending on how those pieces come together. Okay?
Well, you have to accomplish buying it and sell the building when you're
You have to have a plan.
You got to have a plan.
Yeah.
You got to have a plan. Absolutely. Yeah. Which is the mission field analysis, right? We have way more buildings than we need. We know that, right? Because we're spending way too much on real estate. We are not in the real estate business. But sometimes we act as though we are because that's what we hang on to. Right?
The sentimental attachment to the building.
Oh, absolutely.
Is everything.
Yes. Okay. So number 6 is close and become a second site. So the church closes, and another vital, healthy church then chooses to have that as a second site. Okay? Now, that existing congregation may or may not be a part of that new congregation. They would have to buy into the vision, go through the membership classes, and be a part of who they are and what they're going to do. It's not like somebody's just going to come in and save you and let you do what you've always been doing and continue down the decline. Right? Okay? So that's kind of a multi-site model. Number 7 is close and release for a new birth. So that means the church says, you know what? We have tried. We have tried. And we know that God is not done with this church. But we don't have what it takes to start a new life cycle. And we realize that. And it's okay. But in our faithfulness, we're going to close our church. And we're going to allow a new congregation to come in here and restart a whole new congregation. Now, in order for that to happen, you've got to look at the mission field. Is a church needed there? Okay? Are there assets to do that? Is the building conducive for that? Right? There's factors. It's just not like every church can do that. Okay? Because if you're, I know we still have churches here that don't have inside plumbing, right? That is probably not a place that you would close and release for a new birth. Okay? Unless there was a large endowment that was going to update that building and it was in a very populated area.
And most like that are.
Correct. Correct. Right? Our churches are so close together because that's what a horse could actually go in one day, right? Right? The circuit rider. Yeah. Yeah.
All this is under the United Methodist umbrella, correct? The new birth, the second starts, and everything like that are yoked with a new or another United Methodist church. Like the new birth couldn't be with some other church or something like that.
That would be if the property were sold and the trustees sold it to another church. But all of these strategies would be within the congregational development of the United Methodist Church.
Okay.
Only if the real estate was sold and another church bought it, would it be outside of that. Yeah. Okay.
Are these in any particular, I mean, like after number 4, you know, these are in steps?
No.
So after 4 you wouldn't
these would be 9 different treatment plans that you could choose.
I would say that the vital merger would be up before you look at any of these close and...
No, you would choose close or vital merger.
No, but I meant the vital merger would be the first thing you would look at before you went to close.
You think? We're going to talk about that in a minute. Okay? Okay? All right. So a takeover or an acquisition, I don't know that I like that terminology, but that's what it's talking about, is that another church comes in, and it's very close to a multi-site, but another church comes in and says, okay, we're not going to ask you to close and put in a new congregation, but we're going to come in and you're going to become this church, this United Methodist Church with this vision and our discipleship process and our worship and that kind of thing. It's like you're taking that DNA and vision and planting it in a new location.
It's like in the business world when a company acquires another one and they bring their ideas, their training, their resources, you run with this vision because this is what's working. Yours is already not working.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. You got it. You got it. All right. So now we're to vital merger. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Now, it is not a merger. There is a difference between a merger and a vital merger. Okay? Mergers are done just for survival. Okay? Too many times we take this declining church and this declining church and think that if we put 2 declining churches together, we're going to have one growing church. Okay? Friends, it doesn't work because we don't have a culture and DNA of growing and multiplication and reaching new people. Okay? But if we have a vital merger, A vital merger is when 2 or more churches come together, preferably in a neutral spot. Get that neutral spot, everybody give up the real estate, and we come to a neutral place with a new vision to reach new people. That is a vital merger. Okay? Now, you're going to hear more about this on Friday at our presentation, but at 10 o'clock on Friday, you won't want to miss it. And we're going to talk about vital mergers. But vital mergers is one of our 4 conference strategies for reaching new people. Okay? We believe in it, but we're not going to do mergers. We are not going to do mergers. It's a waste of time and resources. We're not going to do things for survival. But we will do vital mergers that when 2 or more churches come together in a neutral spot to do a new thing with a new vision to reach new people, we're all over that. Do you hear the difference? Mm-hmm. Okay, go ahead.
As a pastor of a smaller church,
yep.
The only thing that's up there, the only treatment plan that's up there that could really, when you have people who have ownership of that church, the only thing that's up there that could really appeal to them and maybe motivate them would be number 4, be experimental. Everything else is no treatment, sorry, you're going to go. Die with dignity, become a missional church, which is, just house the food bank. Close, be acquired by another church, and then they will now be you, or you will now be them. And vital merger the same. So if there's a desire at all for the little country church to continue because their great-grandfather laid the river rock that put the church up, the only one that's there is be experimental. Don't you think?
I think you've got to get back to the point of being the church and not a chapel that takes great names.
That's right.
Okay? And then any of these things are possible. Because to me, it can be really exciting to say, our congregation, these remnants, are going to lay the foundation for a whole new generation of people to know Christ. There are people that can get really excited about that when they get outside of themselves. So let me give you a story about St. Paul's in Joplin, Missouri. Okay, southwest Missouri. There was a tornado that went through there about 10 years ago. Devastated that town. Y'all probably heard about that, right? Okay. St. Paul's United Methodist Church had about 45 people at that point. Okay. Main drag of town. Great traffic flow. Okay. But they were very stuck in their ways. Well, that tornado took them out completely. Nothing left. Okay. And so that particular church then decided they wanted to rebuild. It's like, are you sure you want to rebuild? Yes, we want to rebuild. And as a matter of fact, we found the architect who has the 1964 plan so we can rebuild it exactly.
Of course they do.
Wow.
So it took us a while, but we got them to the point of at least looking at a new building plan. Okay, so it had great hospitality space, children's space, that kind of thing. So we did. I'm sorry, this is St. James. I said St. Paul. St. Paul's was blown away a little bit. St. James was blown away completely. So they rebuilt. Now, in the meantime, they were meeting at one of our other community United Methodist churches. In their small group, they didn't want to be a part of the other worshiping community, but they met as their little Sunday school class. Okay, and surely when we built the building, more will come. Right? Y'all have heard that before. And guess what? Even fewer people came back. Because many of the housing was at a shortage. Some people moved in, moved away, had to find, over the next town to find housing. People had died, so on. Because you can imagine the shortage of contractors when a town is devastated like that. So it took a while for all this to happen. So they decided that they wanted to do a consultation process. We called it the Small Church Initiative. So I went in with a quarter-time pastor. This was a quarter-time pastor that took this consultation on, okay, who was attending full-time licensing school at the same time, okay? And so they wanted to do the small church initiative as a consultation, went in, looked at it, gave them some recommendations. They go, yes, we're going to do it. So we started implementing some of the changes. You know, put a team together to do this. Well, when it came time to put the teams together, nobody'd show up. Nobody wanted to do anything. And this pastor and I were working harder than anybody else in the congregation and collectively within the congregation. So finally I said to the pastor, let's take a look in the mirror. They're telling us, with their lack of involvement, that they thought this was a great idea. But they thought it was a great idea for somebody else to do. Okay? So we need to have a critical conversation. So we went back to them and said, here's what we're hearing. Okay? Here's what's happening. Is this a clear reflection of really what's going on? It's like, we're tired. We don't want to do this. Like, all right. So let's put all of ourselves out of our pain and have a different conversation. Okay? You all had the opportunity. You know what it's going to take to be a different church to reach new people. And you all have already said, we're not the people that are going to be able to do that. Are we hearing that correctly? Yeah. So let's have a different conversation. How can you give a leg up to a whole new congregation? So we began the legacy conversations in the fall at an annual conference in June. They brought the keys to their building, totally paid for, brand new building, and $100,000 in their checking account and said, we want to gift this to the next generation to reach new people. Wow. Faithful people. Now, it took a whole lot. It took a tornado and rebuilding and going through a process for them to understand that they weren't able or willing to do it, and then critical conversation and giving them options. Okay? Now, so in June, they gave up their keys. The following February, we put a planter in that church. It's called The Light. Look it up. The Light in Joplin. And this pastor came in, and we don't normally recommend this, that he was on a fast track, and he launched in October. You normally launch in a year, okay? He launched in October, actually September, late September. And he launched with multiple services of 300 people.
Wow.
Okay? For trunk or treat that year, the police had to shut him down because they had caused a traffic congestion problem on the 3-lane road out in front of the church for the 3,000 people trying to get on their parking lot.
Wow.
Okay? Now, St. James went through some really hard work. That was a really difficult decision for them. But what? Faithful disciples. So that now 500 people at the Light now know Jesus Christ who didn't before. They could have hung on. They had enough money to hang on for another couple of years. But they chose to be faithful so that God could reach through their gifts and their faithfulness to reach more people. Friends, I think those are the stories we need to be talking about. I mean, that's what we can celebrate. We don't have to celebrate. I mean, it's really tough to talk about closing churches. Nobody wants to close a church. But you know what breaks my heart is the number of churches out there that don't care that they're not making disciples. That they don't even know that they're not being the church because we haven't had the critical conversations. We haven't done the health assessments.
The thing is that the church closes because of the, I would say, spiritual negligence of the congregation, and then they want to blame it on the conference and say, oh, the conference is the one moving pastors and shutting down churches. Mm-hmm. And I had that question arise on my last week Christian meeting. I said, no, churches are closing because we're allowing them to close because there's people that don't have a commitment. So unless you want to be in the same boat, I recommend we start moving.
There are no healthy, vital, growing churches that are closing.
You know, it's really funny. One of the churches in our area was the ad board decided the best thing was to close. And so they had a congregational meeting after and to vote on the recommendation of the ad board. And people came out of the woodwork to vote against closing. This church, for some reason, did not have a membership list. They don't even know if the people who voted were really members of the church because nobody had ever seen them before. But they said they were members, so they had to take their vote. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who brings this to the churches? Like, I'm a PPRC chair of a 2-point charge. One, both on different life cycle stages. And one is the smaller church that's decreasing. Who brings this to them? Is it me that brings it to them? Is it discussions with the pastor? Does the DS? Like, does it get till it's so bad that it comes to this? Or is it my job, because I've gone through this training, to bring it to them as PPRC chair, but I feel like I'm only PPRC chair? Does that make sense?
Not the word only doesn't make sense. So let me help unpack that. It could be any of those scenarios. Okay. What we hoped that writing this resource would do is that anyone who picked up this resource and wanted to start this conversation could get a group of people that would start the conversation. Okay? And there are, and let me also tell you, I'm giving away some of the stuff that's going to happen at annual conference, but Small Church Tech-Up is going to be one of our fall learning communities. So there is going to be an 8-week process, or 8 sessions. You could do it over 8 months or however you want to do it. That's going to help you even go deeper into this resource. So that's an added piece for you to take to your local congregation, so that there are guided questions to help dig at the situation, to help them come to their own conclusion. You see, we could have forced Small Church Initiative and just kept trying and beating our heads up against the wall. But at some point, you had to just say, time out. What's happening here is a reflection of your all's not participating. Is what you're really saying is, we just can't do it. Would that be true? Which started the critical conversation to say, so what are our options? So I believe it's helpful if a layperson brings it as opposed to the pastor. Okay? Not to say that a pastor can't bring that, but this is why the team is really important if you're the pastor and want to start this conversation. Okay? If you're the pastor and want to start this conversation, I would go to one of your most deeply committed followers of Christ who gets it, you know what I mean? Who gets it, and say, would you read this book with me? And I just love to have your impressions. And then if they go, oh, say, what do you think? Let's put a team together and just walk through this resource. That starts the conversation, okay? But the other piece that I mentioned earlier are the vitality teams, okay?
And I'm on one of those too.
Right.
Yeah.
And so vitality teams are meant to go in and start having some of those conversations. And it could start some of the best conversations to getting at what we really need to be talking about in churches is the life cycle. If we just really talk about the life cycle of the church and the vision, relationships, ministry, and structure and how they're different, that opens up a whole lot of opportunity for conversation and say, so are you all willing to start a new life cycle? And if so, that means we've got to go back to vision and outside relationships as a priority.
And to do the life cycle, because that's one of the ones Marion had kind of directed me toward. I should have somebody else come into that church, or I could bring it to that church.
If you're in your, I would not do it in your own church.
Right.
I think it's helpful.
Church or not?
But if you go to another church in your district and have that conversation,
right,
you're the neutral outside voice.
Okay.
Okay.
But not in her charge.
But
not in the charge.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yes. Okay. All right. I'm going to give you, I'll walk around if you have any other questions, but I'm going to give you a few minutes here to kind of process at your table. What kind of small church are you? And what kind of treatment plan do you think makes some sense? And what are your next steps? So just process it a little bit at your tables, and then we'll come back in a little bit and unpack that. Okay? Take a few minutes.
Yeah.
Where 3 and 4
Nice question. Yeah.
Handicap is not the proper word, but I gave up trying to keep up with all the different words. But have a handicap awareness Sunday where
So
everyone
close
willing.
and restart is when it goes dark,
Blinders.
and you have a ramp up time for a new congregation to come in. And then the other one that you talked about was the start.
Close and release.
So that means that it may or may not be a rebirth at that location. You could rebirth at the next county over, or it could be at the next city over. You allow for rebirth wherever birth needs to take place. So you're not tied to the building necessarily. Could be. Or no site. You could be meeting in a school, or a bar, or a library, or the river. Yeah, I noticed that. I noticed that.
You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised you'll have as well.
Oh, I know. That's right. Question.
Do you have a recommendation for how regularly these teams should meet so that keep the momentum but not have people committed so much that they're there every week? Or is there a recommendation?
I think that's part of the covenant that you all have to decide. Okay, so we're going to do this for 8 sessions. Okay? And you're going to have homework in between. So does it feel like once a month? Or do you want to go every other week? You know, the closer they are, the shorter amount of time that it gives you. You have to be more intense. And so that's just part of your covenant agreement on how quickly you want to go.
Would not recommend going longer than a month?
I would not recommend going, because I think you do lose momentum when you go longer than a month. Yeah. Yeah. But there's got to be accountability built into that covenant so that the homework gets done too. Yeah. Because nothing's more frustrating than you come back and you don't have all the information to take the next step. Yeah. Yeah.
Being newly assigned to these churches, and my one church that I said was smaller, and it really is, but I don't want to give up on them. I want to see if somebody new will ignite something in them. Is that wrong?
You got to have the critical conversation. Okay. I mean, go through the process and say.
Am I just delaying the?
It depends on the congregation. What this process is either going to do is make them mad. Friends, it could make them mad. It could spark something to say, "Huh, I never really thought about us really supposed to be making disciples." Huh? Or to say, "You know what? We're tired." And you've just given us permission to have this conversation and to say, it's okay if this season is over. Okay? So the conversation and the questions and the process help you get to the point of knowing your diagnosis. Right? So for me to diagnose from here is impossible without walking through that process. Okay? You're welcome. I know that's not the answer you probably wanted.
No, it's good. No, it really is good. I forgot that critical conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So the book will be available when?
It is available now, and it will be in the Cokesbury store at annual conference. Okay? And there's a picture of it. There's cards. You're welcome to take these cards with you. So you know what book you're looking for.
Do you need to have a conversation about having this conversation with anybody, like your staff, or do we just get the book and we can start having the conversation?
What you'll want to, there's a place on our website. Again, this is all going to be part of the Friday experience that you'll be having 10 o'clock Friday, don't miss it. It will be an invitation for you to sign up for the small group, and then that precipitates you getting the resources to be able to start your small group. And then there'll be help in getting that started when you sign up for a small group.
You mean the pastors are going to be a part of the small group? Or your church is part of the small group?
Someone from the church signs up that they want to start a small group in their church.
Okay.
Okay. And then we resource you to be able to do that.
Okay.
Okay. I think it's best for the pastor and a lay person to co-lead the small group experience. Okay? And do the covenant piece of it. Okay?
This is a timing question. I brought the schedule up here on their little Yaz or whatever thing. And the plenary starts at 8:15 and there's nothing scheduled in it at 10 o'clock? What is, so?
We're part of the plenary.
All right, that was the question. I assume you're part of that? Is that what, okay.
Yeah. I'm just going to say it may be nothing like you've ever seen before.
Okay.
Oh, build it up.
Yeah, there better be no...
Better be no what?
Letdown.
Okay, so you can take the cards with you if you want to hand those out to say, here's something that, you know, I went to a workshop about, you know, do we want to have more conversation about it? Okay, if you want to start a small group and are looking for the resources beyond just the book, then sign up for the small group on our event page on the website. Again, you'll have all this information on Friday as well. And then that will start the process to give you the resources to do it in your own church. If you have a multi-point charge, friends, I would suggest bringing them together. Okay, what you'll find is you may have a church that goes, ooh, we want to do a new thing. And this church may go, ugh, I don't want to. Okay, and that's okay. And we cannot force a church to go along with another church. Each church has its own unique life cycle, its own unique vision. Okay? And we have to acknowledge that. But as pastors in this room, I will deny it. I will deny it. But friends, you've got to, if you're the pastor, if you're the leader of these churches, you lead where there's the spark. Don't spend all your time doing resuscitation. Okay? We spend way too much time doing resuscitation work instead of doing missional work to reach new people. Okay? So, if you have a multi-point charge, you know where the sparks are, and you fan those flames. Okay? All right. A couple of things. First of all, you have an evaluation. You do not get out of the room until you give our room host. Can we thank her for serving her? Until you give her the evaluation, you don't get out of the room.
I thought we needed to turn them in order to get our certificate.
And then you do not get your CEUs until you turn in your evaluation. There are CEUs for pastors, and there's certificate of completions for laity. So she'll need to know if you're a lay person or a pastor, so you get the right certificate. Okay? All right, now, the story I told you of St. James is a day of new beginnings. We could have very well looked at that as another church closed. But friends, it was a day that allowed new beginnings to start. Now, there's a song. This is a day for new beginnings. Have you ever looked at the lyrics to this? Time to remember and move on. Time to believe what love is bringing, laying to rest the pain that's gone. For the life and death of Jesus, God's mighty Spirit now and then can make for us a world of difference as faith and hope are born again. Then let us, with the Spirit's daring, step from the past and leave behind our disappointment, guilt, and grieving, seeking new paths sure to find. Christ is alive and goes before us to show and share what love can do. This is the day of new beginnings. Our God is making all things new. In faith, we'll gather around the table to show and share what love can do. This is a day of new beginnings. Our God is making all things new. I think God can make all things new through our small churches if we choose to get back on focus of being a missional church of making disciples. It's as simple as that. Amen. And we just have to have critical conversations to get us back on. Or gift a future to someone else who can do it. All right? Can I pray for you before you go? All right. If you want to stand, or you're probably tired of sitting, you're welcome to stand if you'd like to. Let us go to the Lord. Precious and loving Jesus Christ, we are so appreciative of this time that we've had together, of this time of dreaming about what our church could and should do. God, we know that we've had critical conversations even in this room today. So God, we just ask that you give us courage and give us the boldness to leave here and go forth and have those critical conversations to help us get back on track of being the church that you desire us to be. For Lord, we know that there are a ton of people out there that still love, that would still want to know and love you, Jesus, and we have not been the church that has allowed people to do that. So God, just let us go back out into this world of hurting people, that we may be the love and grace of Jesus Christ, and that they would come to know you through us. Let us go forth boldly. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.